things. For those who don't know me, I'm a researcher working in University of Niš, but also for some time already involved in many different EU access activities, among which is HRS for our process. I was working as an assessor for some time already, but I was also working as a lead researcher for drafting and implementing the strategy of my own organization, University of Niš, and I was also involved in some other projects in supporting the organizations from the region in developing their own HRS for strategies, making their own action plans. Now, let me just share my screen. Today it's time to talk about internal review for interim assessment. I have a pleasure, to present the most boring, let's say, topic, the stage of implementing your strategy in which you are not actually challenged. At least you are not challenged by the assessors or by European Commission. We will see about that shortly. Why did I say that? But in fact, I still believe that it's quite important phase, because it's a milestone in which you are having a lot of responsibility, and responsibility is even greater because the power of judgment is on you. It is on you to decide whether your progress is good enough to continue with a continued commitment and to continue to work on implementation of your action plan until the site visits review, or you need to implement some corrective measures. Of course, you will be helped by assessors in doing that, but as I said before, you will not be actually challenged. Organization, let me just, okay. This is the diagram you have already seen a lot of times, and it somehow illustrates the life cycle of the strategy, of the work you implement, you carry out in building the strategy and implementing the action plan. After these first 2 years in which you're supposed to implement the action for your initially proposed action plan endorsed by European Commission, eventually with some corrections after the assessment of your initial plan, then you're facing this self-assessment or interim assessment or internal review, in which your role is to self-assess the progress, to report about this progress, and eventually, if there are some changes in your plan, to propose the revised action plan. Then this report is reviewed by one assessor. Before that, the review is assessed for administrative eligibility by the European Commission. Then assessor do the assessment of quality of the action implementation and fulfillment by looking at the targets, indicators, timeline, basically everything you did in this stage of self-assessment. As I said before, the review is considered as the recommendation only, so you will not. There is no way for you to be, for your HRA award to be revoked at this stage. So the only thing that you can get is a kind of slap on your wrist, kind of warning that something is wrong, but also we sincerely hope that you will not come to this and that the review you get from assessor will be, let's say, much more optimistic. So there are 3 possible review outcomes. The first one is the encouragement to continue along the path, and this is the best possible scenario, obviously. However, if everything is okay, that's great. However, have in mind that you're still doing self-assessment, that you have a lot of bias in your work, that even though you engage probably, possibly, and most desirably researchers from your organizations in this self-assessment stage, as you are doing that also in the initial phase, still be very careful about this review outcome, because there is not enough data at this point, and you have only one assessor's eyes are, let's say, weaker than the 3 assessors' eyes. So this assessment do not hold that, let's say, strength, do not hold I would say that you should take it very seriously, but you still should continue look at what you're doing and the outcomes of your work. The second possible outcome is encouragement to undertake specified corrective actions to improve already sufficient performance. So you're still on a good path, but reviewer had some comments related to some problems that have been identified in your report. And the third one, the not desirable one, if review have seen some major problems in your report, some major discrepancies, some major inconsistencies between your current action plan and the previous one, or current action plan and the gap analysis from the initial phase, that you will be warned to take, then you will be warned to take strong corrective actions in case of judgment of insufficient progress or low quality of the action plan's implementation. That may happen also if in the initial phase, you did not get, maybe assessors missed something, something that can be eventually seen in the internal review stage by this additional assessor. So basically, as I said before, you cannot fail. You're not challenged, but this is a very important milestone for you, because this is very good opportunity for you to improve, to look at what you have been doing in past 2 years, but not only with your eyes, but also with eyes of your researchers, because you are supposed also to implement some kind of exercise in which they will be engaged and they will be asked to somehow assess the progress of your actions. So this is not the threat to have the label revoked. You are much more relaxed, but still you will need to stay very responsible about this. And the assessment report, you can consider it as a kind of friendly advice, because all of us working as an assessors are very committed to the values described in the Charter and Code document. And many of us are very experienced in reviewing the other reports, the other applications for the initial phase. So we have seen a lot of different strategies. We definitely so far had some measure of the expectations we could have from different organizations. Most of us are very tough of the comments, but very easy on the marks. So this is some kind of in any way you can definitely take this report in a good it was made in a good faith and as a useful suggestion on how to continue the process. One thing you have to be also aware of is that even if you are not satisfactory with your progress in the past 2 years, and you're happy that you can pass this internal review without failing, that's not a good place to be, because HRS for our process is playing a long game. Because if you are not happy now, when you cannot fail, imagine what could happen in 3 years at the site visit, because at that time your label can be revoked. So you should definitely very seriously take any warnings you get from assessor. But again, I come back to my initial point that you should be very serious and very responsible about judging your own work. No matter if this judgment was made by some kind of a work group or steering committee, or the pool of researchers you involved in some kind of survey or any other engagement activity. So in a glance, I mean, the internal review is performed in this way. So you basically review the fulfillment of the initial action plan. You look at what you have promised initially to your researchers, to your organization, to your ecosystems, and the bottom line to European Commission. And then you see where you are with each of the individual actions. There are some statuses that you can assign to each of the action. We will see later about that. There are some indicators and targets you proposed in the initial phase. So basically, you need to look at those targets and see if those targets have been met. It's as simple as that. Then based on that, you will draft a revised action plan. So you will have to extend some of the actions because you did not finish them, which is quite okay. This is not really a big deal. The big problem is that if you have to extend all of the actions, so if you don't have any performance or vast majority of the actions, then again, of course, it's this is also a relative thing because there are some actions which take much more effort than some others. So you will have also to take this into account when assessing your progress, because assessor will do that. Assessor will also consider the weight of the individual action when looking at the current status of this action, if it was extended or finished or whatever. In any case, you will have to make some revisions. Maybe you will have some other circumstances involved. You will have some national strategy for research that was adopted in the meantime. Based on that strategy, you will maybe have to plan some other actions. They will be added to the initial action plan. Maybe you will get more ambitious when you see that your action plan is progressing well. So you have to kind of raise the bar and maybe involve some of new things you want to do to address some of the identified gaps within the initial phase. Whatever you do, you will draft a revised action plan and we have to publish it. Publishing the action plan is a kind of expression of commitment to your ambition to implement this action plan. So it's a kind of public commitment. It's commitment to your researchers. They are all now aware of your activities with regard to this topic, and also the other researchers that would like to be employed in your organizations that compete at your job for your job ads will see that, and they will be aware of your ambition to improve in HR management in organization. Basically, you will have the forms at your disposal, which are similar to the forms you get in an initial phase. We will shortly get into it also. This is a kind of overview what you need to do. You have, if you are a person with assigned case for HRS4R process in your organizations, you will see in your access area, you will see that HRS4R link to access the HRS4R tool. Then you will click on the number of your case in the next page, and then you will simply start entering data, and the data you enter is pretty similar to the one you entered before in initial phase. There are very similar outlook of forms at this for preparing internal review to the one in the initial phase. You will have to put some organizational information, that you will enter strengths and weaknesses of the current practices, actions, including OTMR policy, and again, some of those actions after your work on the internal review will be new ones, the actions you want to add to your action plan. Some of the others will be the actions which have been assigned a status in progress. Then for some of them, and hopefully for many of them, you will mark them as completed, and for as few as them as possible, you will have to assign the extended status, meaning that for some reason this action has not been implemented in the previous period, and now you have to continue work on it with the extended deadline. And finally, some remarks related to implementation. The form you will see will be populated with the data entered in the initial phase. You will see the data you have entered in the initial phase in the HRS4R tool, so it will be more easier for you to write to follow up on those remarks you have made at that time. However, this will be the case only if organization used HRS for our tool in this previous stage. So if not, the forms will be empty. So you will have to, you will start basically working on your internal review without insight into what you have been done before. But this initial review, of course, you will have on your hand in some other format, which was used at that time. So now I want to just shortly show you the pages. This is the demo account. So basically this organization is not the one. And the data is dummy data, but it's a good it's just sufficient for the illustration. Also, this is not a form you will actually see. This is the form as it will be seen by the assessor, but basically the form will be almost the same. Just I mean, with the same outlook, just that you will be having possibility options to add data. At this page, I can only see them, but you will be able to add information about all the aspects of your internal review. The first aspect is organizational information. This is important for assessor because every application or every internal review is assessed in some context. First of all, this context is defined by the size of your organization and the structure of its employees. So what is typically looked at and what gets the most attention here in this data is how many international students you have, or international researchers actually you have, meaning that if you have a lot of them, that means that assessor then expects to have many actions addressing them. I mean, because they have many administrative problems. Typically we know about it, so we expect for the organization to take a special care about them. The similar stands for also the external funded researchers. Also, when we look at the number of women among researchers, we can say, okay, there is a gender balance or not. And if these figures are not similar, there is some kind of imbalance, then we will look at the actions related to gender situation, to improving the situation, to ensuring that men and women have the equal opportunities for career advance. Also, what we will be looking at is the number of the early stage researchers or postdocs, R1 and R2, because also this structure, this ratio of researchers could have some impact on deciding what kind of actions you will be implemented. I mean, if you have lots of R1 researchers, then we will look especially at the actions related to training, because those actions will be the most relevant for them. Then regarding research funding, not so important, let's say, for us, but I would say that it would be interesting to see at the competitive funding for the organization, because in a way this could imply the ambition of the organizations to play well on the market. And typically a competitive, very competitive organization is the one that attracts the most talents. So this is again something that's quite important for us to know in order to get a better context information for assessing the actual action plan. Then a little bit about the organizations, and then we go to strengths and weaknesses of the current practices. It's very difficult to do this kind of analysis, you know, because you have a lot of bias. You're judging about your own strengths and weaknesses. Even though we found lots of very important information here that cannot be put in some other field, defining the context for the action plan and some other aspects of the application. So at this stage, for each of the topics, like ethical and professional aspects, recruitment selection, working conditions, and training and development, you will be seeing your remarks from the initial phase, and then you will be able to enter the strengths and weaknesses that are relevant for interim assessment. You will be able to put some remarks. For those remarks, we expect to have some kind of, let's say, description of changes. So what happened in the meantime, why your perception of strengths and weaknesses have changed in the meantime, if they did. That would be interesting to know, because by that we can assess the ambition, the direction organization is taking, the ambition with which is developing, solving, addressing its own weaknesses, and promoting its strengths. Also, with regard to that, you will be able to specifically enter some information or data or perception about your perception on if some of your priorities for short and medium term changed. So this is pretty similar to what you can also enter above when considering strengths and weaknesses. Then information about some changes related to the circumstances in which your organization operates. I also mentioned some major national strategies for research or action plans that put something new on the table, that put some new requirements you have to meet. Sometimes those requirements can be in line, and most of the times it will be in line with the charter and code principle. So they will have basically positive impact on your HR strategy, but maybe in some case they won't be in line, and it will make your work in meeting those charter and code standards, let's say, more difficult. And of course, you will be having opportunity to add if there are any strategic decisions underway that may influence the action plan. Those strategic decisions can make on the organizational level, but also at the national level. And then we go to the most important part. And basically, as you can see, all this talk is pretty similar to what you expected to do also in initial phase, because the form is very similar to the one in initial phase, and you have probably already seen this form for entering the actions. It is basically, this is exactly the same like the one in the initial phase. So you need to put some statement of action to list the principles, charter and code principles that will be addressed, or gaps that will be met by this action, gaps within some of the principle. Here is this opportunity to add indication, the status of the action, if it was new one, if you added a new action, if this is an extended one or something else. Then you can you can add timing, you can indicate who is responsible unit, what is the indicator that you are measured for success. We will be talking about that later on, and what are the targets. At the end, you will be, after you finish your revised action plan, you will be also getting automatically here the unselected principles, the principles that you have not selected initially. Basically, this list needs to correspond to the list of the principles for which you did not identify any gap in the initial phase. There is no way to revise a gap analysis, your gap analysis at this point. So basically, you are doing the work based on the actual action plan for the initial phase. You don't take into account the gap analysis from the initial phase. So then, basically, you put this in appropriate format, whatever you want. You print that as PDF, and then you upload this PDF to the web page you have previously created in the initial phase, where your action plan is. So you're replacing the existing action plan with a new one before the assessment take place. Also, you put some of the comments on the implementation of the LTMR principles, you can see pre-populated text area from the initial phase here. And of course, if you have some revisions to the OTMR checklist, then you will have to, and of course, if you have some accomplishments or achievements or new documents or bylaws, procedures or whatever, you will be uploading those on the dedicated OTMR webpage on your website, which can be also a sub-page of this HRS4R, or it can be completely different page, maybe even more accessible, because this is something that's the content that's very important for the candidates for the jobs you advertise. Then a few words about the implementation, general overview, but also some answers to some specific questions. How have you prepared the internal review? Very general notes about the process, and then some details about your rate or way to involve the research community in the implementation process. Did you implement the survey? Did you implement some other way of communication with them in order to get evidences on your progress? So the progress you assess is not the progress you as a member of work group see, but the progress independent, let's say, actors, stakeholders, the key stakeholders, the employees to which, for whom you are doing all this, are seeing or are perceiving. So do you have an implementation committee and a steering group regularly overseeing progress? Is there any alignment of organization policies with HRS for us? Organizational top management support is a kind of nice way to reflect the commitment, the strength of the commitment of the organization to this work. So if your organizational policies are also embedded with actions or with principles from your HR strategy, then it's also a very good indicator of strong commitment of the organization. How has your organization ensured that the proposed actions will be also implemented? So this is a kind of risk management thing, risk management, how you will be mitigate eventual risks, what you will do to ensure that the things that you have promised will be delivered at the end. How are you monitoring progress, timeline? Do you have some meetings at some milestones in which you are kind of assessing what actions have been completed and which actions need to be extended? How will you measure progress in view of the next assessment, and how do you expect to prepare for the external review? Lots of important questions. They are all basically project management related. This is something that I cannot suggest. I mean, I cannot suggest any kind of direction in which you will be going when preparing for this assessment or for the external review, because this is part of your organizational policy, organizational procedures. I can give you just some tips in the continuance of this presentation. Let me just come back to the slides. So after you submit your internal review, you will be undergoing administrative eligibility check. It will be carried out by the European Commission. You could expect to get feedback within 4 weeks after submission. Don't panic if you don't get it. There are difficult times now. I guess European Commission is really buried with lots of questions, lots of initial phase application, lots of internal reviews. So please be patient with this. There is a possibility to get rejection because of some administrative problem you have, some lack of data or whatever. Then you're expected to update and resubmit within 2 months. And then after, when you pass this eligibility, administrative eligibility check, then you will be undergoing, then your application will be undergoing the assessment carried out by the individual external expert. So this part, in this part, I would like to stress some of the things that are also relevant for the initial phase, because they're also assessed in the interim assessment. Those are, let's say, the four factors. I mean, I would have to also stress that this is kind of personal perception. I mean, I could not say that all reviewers will be looking at the application by using this perspective, but I believe it's very close and very aligned with the values of the Charter and Code Declaration, with the ambition of, I have seen in many organizations towards providing really nice career development opportunities for their researchers, excellent working conditions, and other, let's say, benefits of this wonderful profession. And I would like to discuss shortly about the four aspects of this, your action plan, namely the commitment, the ambition, outreach, and the quality, in no particular order. So the commitment, as you know, and you are reading in all the important documents, is important. This is something that will be helping your action plan to be developed in on the smoothest way. You know, the commitment means that it will be easy to get a consensus about some gaps, consensus about the ambition of the particular actions to pursue those gaps. And the commitment also means that you will be seeing a lots of top management support, that your rectors or deans of directors of research will be involved in your process by overseeing this process, but also by giving valuable remarks. And also the commitment means that what you do within this HRS4R process will have an impact to the organizational policies, although this is also organizational policy, but let's say at the top level, visionary, long-term or short-term documents, action plans, strategies that are built within the organizations and that address the human resources or anything that's in a way related to human resources of your organization. So basically, if you can provide a clear evidence on the embedment in the organizational policies by providing a short statements about some particular articles of the strategies or some particular actions in other action plan as adopted by your organization in some domain different than HR management, this is the clearest evidence of the commitment of the organization. So assessors love to see that in also in initial phase, but as well in the phase of internal review. This is maybe this is something that's a little bit more difficult to find out, but as I said, this is quite important. Also, on-time delivery is the indicator of the commitment. So if you in your interim, if your internal review wrote that most of your actions are completed as planned, that means that there is a high level of commitment in the organization to pursue the compliance to Charter and Code principles. I will be using a lot of impact words. So the impact originated in the actual action plan is especially appreciated. So it's nice if you can demonstrate that some actions have been completed, but it's wonderful if you can provide the evidence of the impact of those actions. And 2 years is a lot of time, and you can have that. I guess for many of the actions, you can ensure that there are also some visible impact in the field. Of course, that means that maybe you will need somewhat revise your approach to defining the indicators. So in a way, some indicators will be, let's say, goal-oriented, and the others will be impact-oriented. We will be talking about that shortly. Stick to the indicators, stick to the targets you have promised in the initial phase. Sometimes we see rationalization of failure. I call this way. I mean, we are trying to somehow make our failure relative and to present it as a kind of success. There is really no need to do that. Because, as I said, we do not, we as assessors are not assessing the excellence, we are assessing the progress. I mean, and progress can be achieved if you have the commitment. One way to demonstrate the commitment is to be honest. And the acceptance of failure is really a sign of the strong commitment to the values in the charter and code. And trust me, this will be appreciated by the assessors. The ambition is a wonderful thing. I mean, it's really amazing when you see the action plans, and when you, for example, when you look at the gap analysis and when you see lots of problems found in each, maybe sometimes even in each of those 40 principles. So I have seen in the applications initial phase with more than 30 principles we identified gaps, which is quite really a lot. And then you have a lot of problems, and then you say, okay, I will solve all those problems. And not that I will only solve them, but I will also go further with that and show that I will not allow, I will implement the risk mitigation measures that some of gaps never reoccur. And this is also wonderful to see, but sometimes this is not feasible to implement, and assessors will be assessing that. So the context in which you need to position somehow your ambition and the context in which this ambition will be assessed is first of all gap width. So what is your baseline? When we assess the organization, we do not, as I said before, we do not assess its excellence. Our, as an assessor, as the assessors, our baseline is relative thing. I mean, we determine the baseline based on your current state of play, the current state of play in your organization, current status of your organization. Based on that, we assess the application based on the gap width, not actually in general to the absolute compliance to charter and code principles, but basically in a relative way to gap width. Then the size of the organizations, how many researchers you have, how many R1s, how many international researchers. I shortly explained that in the when I was showing the forms. And also your playground size. To which extent the things you want to change depend on the external factors. I mean, in some countries in my neighborhood here, for example, in Serbia for sure, the deadline for applying to the position advertised by the university is 15 days. And this is prescribed by law. So no organization will be extending those 15 days to more. And of course, if you want to apply for the job, you have to have, if you are a foreigner, you have to have your credentials and your diploma recognized. There is no way to do this in 15 days. So basically, this is disqualifying for us. And it's quite difficult, if not impossible, to employ a foreign researcher here in a permanent position, let's say, or let's say more long-term positions, because there are no permanent positions. So this is our constraint. So, and this is basically someone taking our playground for us. So we cannot achieve progress in this way. We can maybe promise some actions. We can maybe plan some actions relating to lobbying, maybe, or for participation of our top management in different groups of think tanks or discussion groups or committees or whatever, where we can push forward and ask for this change, but this is the best we can do. We cannot promise the progress in this term. Also, we are at this phase, as well as the initial phase, we have to talk about the feasibility. I will tell you also one story from one of my experience for one site visit. We did some desk work before the actual site visit, and all of the 3 assessors agreed that organization was amazingly ambitious in addressing the gender gap. The actions, the strategies, the measures, the incentives, the benefits for female researchers. It was really amazing. I mean, something that neither of us have seen in other organizations. So this organization was with a quite big reputation. Of course, I will not tell you what organization that was. And imagine the day when we came there at the city, we met before the meeting, and one of the assessors showed us a news article stating that for the previous day that there was a strike of female researchers at that organization because they were not happy about the things their organization, the one we are visiting, the one with which we were so enthusiastic with, they were not happy with the actions this organization is taking to address this gender gap. So what I'm saying is that it's really great to have lots of ambitions, but really great ambition, but this ambition has to be associated with the feasibility. I mean, there has to be some evidence that this ambition is founded. I mean, this ambition is supported by the set of actions that are pushing the right button and targeting the actual target. As for the quality, we look at this traceability. Traceability means that new action is somewhat associated to the actions defined in the previous stage, and then each of these actions are somehow associated to the gap analysis, and actually to gaps, and then gaps are of course associated and relevant to the principles to which they are assigned. So this relevance, this consistency needs to be visible and it will be checked. It is wonderful when you get this action plan with a very few words, with a very explicit definition of the actions. We do not count the number of words in the action plan. In fact, we appreciate where the actions are clearly defined with as explicit statements, and then we can easily understand and without any vagueness, we can easily understand what the action will be and what action is supposed to achieve. Then maybe the most difficult weakness, the greatest weakness on average of the applications in the initial phase in the appropriateness of the indicators and targets. So basically, in most of the cases, targets are not provided at all, at least for those initial phase applications that I have been reviewing, but only the indicators. In some cases, there are some indicators saying that something will be achieved. For example, some bylaw will be adopted. This is kind of both indicator and target within one statement. But in some other cases, that cannot be seen. For example, this also not the example I will mention is not also related to only to the appropriateness of indicators and targets, but also to approach and how those indicators are being chosen. For example, in some career development action, you are planning to organize some trainings about professional skills, And one of the actions you have is to, you're planning to implement a serious structured program of professional skills training program for your R1 researchers, for example. And then you say indicator is a plan for the program is developed. I mean, it's very good to have a plan. You cannot do anything without a plan. But at least you could have that you will be organizing some number of trainings. The number of training would be indicator, and the target would be, for example, 5. But also this is very weak indicator because we don't know what kind of trainings are involved, but more important, we don't know anything about the potential impact of those trainings. So maybe the better would be to say that your trainings will be attended by 500 participants in total, for example. So the number of participants of the training would be indicated and the target would be 500. But then again, what kind of professor would I be if the indicator of the quality of my lecture would be how many students attended it? I mean, this is not an indicator of the quality of the action. This is also only the indicator of how well you did communicate this action to the potential participants or your researchers. So I ask typically the organizations to look for the indicators which are more impact oriented, but let's talk about this in the next slide. And also quality of the evidence that the actions are completed. In many cases, we will see just the statement that something has been done. But actually, I mean, even though technically, formally, this is sufficient, but we would really like and we would really appreciate to see some kind of evidence that the actions are completed. Some experience from the actions, some statements indicating some outcomes or results from the action. Even some links to some documents that have been created as a result of this action. Goal-oriented versus impact-oriented strategy. I mean, when you are setting up indicator, you can say that your training have been attended by 500 researchers and you are achieving your goal, and that's fine. But what those researchers will do with this training or with this knowledge and skills they gained during your training is exactly what the impact is. And this is something that we will be looking at at your action plan, those impact-oriented indicators, the use of it. This is something that will be highly appreciated. Not that the goal-oriented approach will be penalized. I'm just saying that impact-oriented approach in defining your the most desirable outcomes is something that will be greatly appreciated. And the indicator of the commitment of the organizations to have the outreach. In assessing this approach, we will also have to consider that work culture is a factor. There is a clear difference on average between the strategies coming, for example, from Mediterranean countries and the other coming from let's say, Northern Europe. And not that some strategies are better than the others, and not that some strategies are definitely having some different approach, but you will be seeing lots of these top-down versus bottom-up approaches. So in some communities, bottom-up approaches where you have lots of engagement from researchers will be clearly visible, but on the other way, you will on the other side, you will see some top-down strategies where the word of the rector is the most important, where the top management is the place for where you will get all the directions for implementing your strategies, and that will be seen. That is clearly visible when you assess the especially initial application in the initial phase. Again, the thing that is related also to the above is engagement of early stage researchers in the process. This is the most important for us because with engagement of the early stage researchers in the process, we will be, let's say, more convinced that what you have wrote, what you have promised is evidence-based, and thus, let's say, I'm avoiding to say the honest, but it will reflect the realities of your organizations to the best, in the best rate. Short-term and long-term impact of the actions towards early stage researchers. Again, I mentioned lots of early stage researchers here, because majority, I would say majority of the principles in the Charter Code are addressing exactly this target group. Let's say that they're with all the current political priorities of the European Union and strategies and also organizational policies, I would say that early stage researchers are the most important for one organization. So what happens next? You will have, after you get a positive or any kind of review from the assessors, you will be implementing remarks made by your assessors. You will consider them for the revision of your internal review, actually for the revision of the revised action plan. And again, you will have to publish it as a kind of public commitment to the proposed actions. And then you have 3 years to continue implementation of your actions until the award renewal assessment. Before we proceed to the questions you may have after this presentation, I would also to address some of the questions that I have received before this webinar. So there was one question saying, what is the recommended time to start to write interim assessment? So when to start doing the interim assessment? There is no correct answer to this. I mean, it depends a lot on the size of your organization. It depends a lot on the time it takes, for example, to implement some kind of survey or other engagement exercise. It depends on the convenience or available frequencies to meet with your working group or steering committee on the meetings in which you will be making the decision related to internal review. So there is no easy way to answer that. I can say that for my organizations, we did the internal review, University of Niš. It took some, let's say, month and a half to 2 months to do everything. But I cannot, because it was a long time ago, I cannot say that it was a really busy 1.5 months or 2 months. I guess it was for the size of our organization, it was quite sufficient. But this is something, I mean, that you will have to decide by yourself. Nothing will explode if you break the deadline. So I'm not suggesting that you should be doing that, but I'm saying that it's much better to have a good, well-written, honest internal review than to meet the deadline. I hope that I haven't been too suggestive in this last statement. Is it recommended to do the survey in every phase of the process, and what is the recommended period for the survey? It is absolutely necessary to engage researchers in this process. So it's absolutely necessary to get some kind of, I would say, independent, it's not independent, but let's say external assessment of your work on implementing the action plan. And this kind of assessment is being done best among the target groups of those actions, so among researchers. This will be the most honest assessment, whether you're doing it in a survey if you have a large organization, on you're doing it in a focus group or interviews if you have small organization, that's on you. I mean, it's much easier to implement a survey, but also you will have to take care about the contents of this survey because it needs to be somewhat different than the one you typically do in initial review. So you're not maybe supposed to assess the compliance to each of the principles, but you will have to assess the outcome of the actions you proposed. Basically, some would say that it's essentially the same, but not necessarily. It's on you to decide that because it all depends on the contents of your action plan. Also, when you do survey, it's not just sufficient to just do the survey. This survey needs to be, you need to demonstrate that you have a representative sample among in the researchers among those respondents of the survey. The sample needs to be representative in terms of gender, in terms of career stage, maybe positions in different departments or whatever. And of course, you will need somehow to take care also about these representatives relative to the survey you implemented in first initial phase, because maybe you cannot compare the survey because you have different target groups represented in the other survey. So it's on you, really. You have to take care about all those factors to get the most honest and the most representative opinion of your target groups. The recommended period depends on what you're doing. Is it survey? Is it a focus group? Is it a series of interviews? In any case, you have to plan it in advance. So basically, again, it depends a lot of factors. We can maybe, if you have some additional question with some special situation, we can continue discussing in this direction. The action plan needs to be published before the assessment. So you need to publish the action plan as soon as you revise it, after your internal view has been completed and before your interim assessment started. The question was formulated like that. When you went to publish the updated action plan and gap analysis, and what are also we are required to publish. The action plan is enough. I mean, to publish action plan is quite enough. This is also the expression of commitment to your organization to meet those charter and code principles. And I have not seen organization who publish the gap analysis, because the gap analysis should be something private to your organization, because you maybe identify some weaknesses that you don't want to reveal to the public. Maybe you are on the competitive market, I don't know. I mean, if you are some RD organization, maybe private RD organization, then competing for Horizon 2020 or Horizon Europe funds. So you need to implement this, to develop this strategy. But again, gap analysis is something that can reveal the things that you don't want to be revealed and want to be public. But also this is, I mean, for some publicly funded organizations, that could be some, I mean, I don't see the benefits, but I can see the reasoning behind the publishing gap analysis. So thanks a lot for your attention. Sorry for the hiccups. I'm not the morning person, actually, especially in these times of pandemics. But I will certainly, I'm awake now completely, and I will be certainly happy to answer all the questions you may have.
Thank you, Milan. Okay, so we do have a couple of questions from the chat area. So I will read you the questions, and if anyone wants to elaborate your questions, please do so. So we have two questions from Serna from Montenegro, and she's asking, are we entering cumulative organization figures in the first table at the beginning for the period of review from initial review to this review? For example, 2018 to 2020, number of international students, researchers.
No, you put the absolute figures. So the current state of the play.
Okay. And the second question that also came from Serna is, does the system allow, and this is also maybe a question that Michela could help us with, so does the system allow to have the assessment questions in Word or PDF format beforehand to prepare the inputs for entering into system?
I mean, you can start working on internal review. You can see the form. You don't have to enter the data immediately. I mean, you can access the form I have shown before, and you can see this form, and then you can just start working. You can copy and paste questions from there, and then you can start working on your internal review. And then when you prepare what you need to enter in this form, then you get back to this form, then you enter it and submit it. You can also, and Michela can correct me if I'm wrong, you can also start working on the document and then save it. And then when you think it's completed, finished, then you can submit it. So saving a form does not mean that you're doing submission.
Thank you, Milan. Thank you, Milan. That's exactly what I wanted to say, that you can save the draft and come back to it afterwards.
Thanks, Michela. Good to hear from you.
It's great to see you too. Thank you. Thank you very much, Milan. And thanks in particular for adding before, don't panic if the commission has some delay. It's really a complicated period. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so we can go further on. Thank you. So we have a question from Yasmina from Sarajevo, and she says, good morning. Many thanks to Professor Zdravković, who helped us, University of Sarajevo, through our first HRS for our application and reapplication. We are now preparing for the interim assessment, and this webinar is very useful. Thank you. To begin with, could you please share with us the deadlines for submission of interim assessment? For example, if we received our logo on 15th January, is it until this date, 2 years after that, we need to submit interim assessment?
Michela, do you want to answer this?
Yes, sure. Thank you for the question. The deadline start counting in the e-tool from the moment you receive the notification. So it's 2 years after you receive the notification of the internal review feedback.
But they did not use the tool for the initial phase. So could you explain this?
Yeah. Okay. First of all, I want to recall the invitation with every occasion I keep repeating that the e-tool is now the only way to submit internal review. Therefore, if you were handling your case in a manual way, you have to put everything in action to put yourself in the e-tool. In any case, for the deadline, it starts counting from the day you receive the email with the notification results of the interim review. Yes, I hope this answers your question.
Thank you. Okay, further on, we have a question from Reyes from Madrid. Hi, Reyes. She says, okay, so is it mandatory to have a full OTMR system implemented in the institution or only to show that we are on the good path?
No, it's not mandatory. I mean, you have to show that you're on a good path, actually, just to show that there is a progress in implementing the OTMR system. I mean, there is no other way to answer that. Absolutely not.
Okay. So we have a question. Oh, Reyes, do you want to maybe? Hi.
Hey,
Just
hi.
to say hi.
It's good to see you. Hi.
Good to see you. Thank you so much. We had a doubt about the level of implementation of the OTMR at this interim assessment point. So although we thought that it was not mandatory to have everything ongoing, but it's always good to confirm with you. So thank you so much for the webinar, and so nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
Bye.
Bye. Okay, we have a question from Isabel from Liège. Hi, Isabel. She has a question regarding the IT tool. Could you explain the difference between the extended and in progress options for reporting on the actions?
My perception is that extended is something that means that somewhat the action was to some extent endangered, in terms that there is a clear need to extend the deadline for its implementation, even though that it should be completed because, you know, initial phase has been completed. And in progress is something that delayed just for some reason. I mean, just the level of, let's say, the seriousness of the reasons for extending the action. But of course, Michele is here. Isabel, if you have something to add to this, I would really be happy to share.
So okay, nice to see you, Milan, and nice to be yours. It's because we had a discussion with some people involved in this interim assessment, and the question was, what does extended exactly, let's say, refer to? So, and the question was the extension of the, let's say, of the original content. So it means that we will go deeper. So we will extend the scope, or is it the question of not a delay, but perhaps an extension of the duration? And we discussed with Barbara from Czech Republic, and also with Juliana Sabatini from Austria. And we were not sure of the definition of extension as compared to the question of, let's say, in progress. We think that in progress is something that is running. You didn't reach yet your target. You need some time to go further, perhaps because it was planned of 5 years. And when do we decide to put our new, let's say, action in one of the category or the other one? So you speak in terms of time. We spoke about the extension or the broadening of the original content of an original action. So perhaps can we give the advice to the people to be clear on the description of what they intend to do in their new action plan, in order to be sure that the assessor will well understand your own definition, if we have several definitions.
But maybe the best approach would be to have one definition of what extended means. I mean, Michela, do you have something to add on this?
Hey. Oh, I managed to activate my video. Now you can see me. Hello, everybody. Well, I don't have much to add on this. You are the experts, the super experts on that. Well, the extended, the way I see it is that there is a necessity for a supplement of information in order to coordinate at best the interim phase, especially if you go in view of the renewal assessment when you are gonna meet the assessors, and then the picture should be clear and the suggestion should have been taken into account. So an extended action in this sense means that there is a supplement of action to be taken in order to maintain the award at the renewal phase. But you and Isabel are the authorities on that.
Yeah. Okay, we can maybe to leave it like that. I mean, not to continue elaborating. Obviously, there is a need for this to be explicitly defined. I mean, if it's a subject of perception, and obviously, as we can see, maybe even different perceptions. So it's something that needs to be addressed in in the future.
Yeah. For myself, I will call to coherence for the participant if they would like to use in progress or extended action. And what is important is to have something that makes sense. And if it makes sense for you to write extended rather than in progress, because you think that the scope or perhaps the duration or something in your intent of development and implementation makes sense, so you have to use the words that is, let's say, coherent with your perception and with your, let's say, your development. And by having some words that can help the assessor to evaluate, not to evaluate, it's not the good word, to assess let's say, your intention, what you would like to do, that's the most important. So do not hesitate. And I give the advice to all the participants, if you have something to say that can have some, let's say, ambiguous perception, or that can explain what is your way of implementation, use it in your description and in your file. It's very important for the assessor to understand what you have in mind and how you are evolving and progressing.
Okay, thank you. I would just like to add, I'm not skipping the order, I'm sorry, but there is one question that was asked the latest, but it's pertinent for this. So Claire is asking, from the presentation, it sounded to me that in progress means undertaken, not completed, whereas extended means not undertaken yet, action deferred. Is that accurate?
But as you heard already, we don't have accurate, definition here. But as Isabel mentioned, I mean, this is very good message. Whatever you use, you need to describe your actions in a way that is consistent. So this consistency can be recognized by the assessors in this process.
Okay. Okay, so we can go back to the questions asked. So we have a question from Daria. She says, what would be your suggestions to encourage universities to apply for the HRS4R? She's asking for just some principles or code phrases that she could maybe use.
I mean, it's a difficult question. I mean, this is kind of, we have this Article 32, I mean, as a kind of not incentive, but something that relates appropriate policy, I mean, HR policy with the implementation. But I'm not sure that is a good way to promote it. In some cultures, again, I'm coming back to work cultures. In some cultures, the way to say it is that, I mean, if you don't have this label, then you will be difficulties in your first audit after you have completed the Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe project. See, as simple as that. But of course, this is in some other context, this will not be sufficient. I mean, it's very difficult to use this for promotion, but I can say that in many occasions I have seen through this embedment of HR process and it was intertwined with the other organizational policies. I have seen a clear ambition to improve, clear ambition to have a major outreach and good, strong relationships, especially with early stage researchers. And even in some cases, I have already seen the benefits of it. It's very difficult to communicate with the researchers. They're pretty much unaware of anything that's not related to the domain of their research. typically they go to the places where they can meet the best researchers, the best colleagues. So it's kind of difficult to show to them that working conditions is important. It's kind of difficult to demonstrate to them that having access to professional skills, training is something that's good for them. So it's quite a difficult challenge also to make the case to them, not only to the organizations. To be quite honest, I'm not prepared for that kind of discussion, so I'm not sure what to answer other than that. Isabel, would you want to add maybe?
Yeah. So for me, and what I always say to those who would like to apply or hesitate to apply, I can say that we are really aware in our institution that performance and well-being are correlated. And if we are working on the improvement of the researcher working condition at the level of an institution, and we let it recognize and by the researcher and also listen to them and their needs, I think it's really of added value for the governance board. Secondly, I think that it's really important also to provide an institutional tool to the researcher for helping them to feel good at work, perhaps to find some job and some and to apply to some European project and so on. At the level of institution, it's important because it's a help to better recruit and to let know about to the worldwide community. And the last thing that is of importance, I think, is that we are all working on that. So why not to be recognized by the European Commission? Because we are doing it professionally, and it's really important also to be recognized and to let know about what we are doing. So we are working on the HRS4R process in all the university in the world, because we are taking care of our, let's say, manpower, and we try to have, let's say, happy researchers. And to let it recognized by an official international organization is really important. It requests some work at the level of in the institution, but the most important benefit we took at my level as head of the administration is a nice project involving the researcher and the administration. And I think it's really of added value for us. I never worked with my colleagues such heartily on a project all together at the level of the university. And I think it's really important for that, because not only the researcher have to feel happy at work, we have also to be recognized and to work at the level of the organization. So you embark the administration and the researcher together in an institutional project. I think it's one of the really important added value of this HRS4R process. And it can be a good argument for the board. So you will make it a great project for all the community and at the level of the university.
But we would also, I mean, it would be also great to have our own indicators, I mean, of HRS for our process success. And I mean, this is something between us, but I believe that it's a good place also to say that it would be, in my view, it would be great to have those indicators first, in order to let's say, have more tangible evidences of the benefits achieved by the HRS4R initiative. And also it would be great to have some testimonials from the organizations who implemented their own action plans, and to find out from their own perspective what benefits have been brought by this implementation process with them. But this is on us. I mean, this is not the answer to your question, but just the idea on what we could do to make these benefits clearer. I think Michaela raised
Yeah.
hand.
Yeah, perhaps have some participant can testify on what was really important for them and what decide their board to embark, because I think that it's not so easy, and we have many participants from different countries, and I think that it was not only the Article 32 that was let's say helping to embark the organization in this process.
Michele, please, you can. Yeah.
Just wanted to add one small thing to complement what Milan and Isabella has said. Of course, there is also a huge increase in international visibility because of the HRS4R. Do not forget the HRS4R is once the institution obtains the logo, it will be published on the Euraccess network, and it is something that increases the level of general visibility of the institution. Also, the recognition within the international institution, like the European Commission, is something that is extremely relevant. And then, of course, it's in between the lines of what Milan and Isabel already said, but the framework of the HRS4R in itself is of added value for the management of the HR within the institution who are working on it, which are giving a clear framework of work. And according to many institutions, to the feedback provided by many institutions, it will be very interesting to hear what our participants have to say. The feedback that we obtained in the past is very positive, especially for the way the HRS4 provided a framework for concentrating the HR work on the institution participating.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, should we go further on with the questions? So we have 2 questions from Yasmina. Regarding the action plan, she asked, do we write about indicators or just whether an action is new, completed, in progress, or extended? At what point do we justify that an activity took place? Is it just by stating that it was completed, or do we need to write numbers, etc.? That's the first question.
I mean, you just entered the status completed in the form next to this section, but also it wouldn't hurt to put some evidences, as I mentioned before, that the action was completed. I mean, for example, if it was a training organization, that you have organized this and that training and that many people participate and stuff like that. So not extensive, I don't know, the document with the evidence. If you have a link to the document, you can put it also in the description of action. So there is no field, if you're asking that, for elaboration on how the action was completed, but you can put it in the description of action.
Okay, thank you. Yasmina also asked if we need to publish our revised action plan. Does this mean that we need to have it adopted by the Senate the same way we adopted the strategy and the action plan in the application process? This is something that might be problematic because we need to wait for the monthly sessions.
It depends on how the decisions are made in your organizations. I mean, sometimes I have a feeling, you know, that this document can be adopted at the level of the steering committee and the working group in charge for the organization, especially if the top management is involved, engaged in the work of steering committee. Then you have all the necessary, you have all the decision power to make this decision at the level of steering committee. But in some organizations, other organizations, the top management bodies of the university of organization will be making the decision. I mean, if you, Asmina asked me for this specific case, I mean, even though the Senate has made the decision of adoption of the initial strategy, I would say that if you have a support of management and people sitting in the steering committee, that you don't have to go again through this adoption process. But then again, this all depends on your organization rules, procedures, and how you did organize the work on the internal review.
Okay, thank you. So this is actually all of the questions that we received through the chat. I don't know if anyone else would like to comment on anything or ask any questions, please do. This is the opportunity. Michele, I think you raised your hand. If you want to add something, please.
I think Isabel had raised the hand before me.
Oh, I didn't see it, sorry.
Thank you, Michele. So what I would like to say regarding the two last questions is that what is important for you is to spend more time to implement the HRS4R strategy than to report on what you've done. What is really important is to provide evidence that you are on the way doing good things and progressing. So it's absolutely necessary for you to collect indicators. It's absolutely for you to report and to have also your HRS4R action plan embedded in the institutional strategic plan. It's really important to have the board let's say, to have the board commitment for what you are doing and what you plan to do. So it depends of your structure. But what is important for the assessor is to have the opportunity to assess your report and to help you also to grow in your action. So for me, the worst is to have 200 pages to read on your interim assessment. What is important is to have a good idea that you are working, and my advice is spend some time and pertinent time to write your interim assessment. What is important is, more important, is to have a good consultation of the researchers, to have the strong support of the institution, and also to spend time to implement your action rather than to report. But the process is the process. You have to write your interim report, and it's a good opportunity to stop a little bit, but not too much time, and on the action plan.
Thank you, Isabel. Michele?
Okay, thank you. I thought of seizing this opportunity to ask Milan and Isabel too, of course, she wants to kick in, a question that I receive very, very often from institutions that goes more or less in this way. We underwent very many changes in the organization of our institution in the last year, and now our action plan is completely different from what it was before last time we submitted. Shall we reintroduce a new one? What shall we do? Sometimes I even have the institution saying we want to abandon the HRS4R and start from scratch. Of course, we advise not to do that, but how would you reply? Because we receive this question at least once per week.
I mean, it's quite a difficult situation. To be quite honest, I would not have any understanding for someone who is changing completely the action plan. And also it all depends on what do you mean by changing it completely. If you committed to the action in the initial phase, you cannot just discard it in the consequent phase, in the consequent stage. I mean, this is the answer I can give and I can provide. What does it mean to go again from the process? I guess this is something that's very, very difficult to understand, to again going from the initial application, but from the formal point of view, I guess it's possible. I mean, I'm not sure what to say. The point is the burden is also on the people who participated in the implementation of the initial, if the initial application. So burden is on the members of steering committee and working group to make their case to the new management or to, in light of these new changes made. Of course, as I mentioned before, if there appears that some action from the initial stage, proposed in initial stage, cannot be implemented because there are some government imposed restrictions, like the example I mentioned, then I guess I would consider, agreeing with removing this action from the action plan. But all the other situation, I would consider that I cannot talk about it because we don't have specific case and I cannot generalize, but as an assessor, I would consider this as a kind of this kind of interim assessment with a lot of changes with a major warning.
Yeah.
Thank you, Milan.
So from my point of view, Michele, I think that the 2 first years of work are really important because you start to implement your action plan. So if you want to change all the action, the question is why? Is it because your board has different opinion or different priority? It can be the question. So, but what about the point of view of the researchers? Because if you played the game correctly, so it means that you try to answer the needs of the researcher with your action plan. So, and the needs of the researcher, they change in the last 2 years. Why? Why did the priority change? And so that's the real question. Is it because you saw that your implementation was not correct, or your way of implementation, or perhaps that you felt in your perception of the needs of the researchers and so on? So I think that you can change everything, but you have to explain why you decide to do that. If you say that we have a new board, it's not their priority to work on ethics. It's not their priority to work on open science. It's not their priority to make the researcher or to develop this kind of improvement of the working condition. My answer will be, so at what's the point of view of the researcher in this sense? So in my university, our second action plan was completely different as compared to the first one. Why? Because at the early beginning, it was really important to have very short-term implementation of action because it was the start of the process, because we focused on also involving the researcher better in in the university, in the action of the university. After 2 or 3 years, we saw that our, let's say, action for trying to convince the people to work on some points was completely different. So our first action plan is expressed as having training for the researcher, political declaration of our board, and administrative implementation of some actions. But today we changed our perspective. We have different packets of action related to improvement in ethics, improvement in doctoral supervision, giving the opportunity to train, let's say, the mentors and the supervisor for the PhD candidates. So, and for us, it makes sense because we developed in parallel different new action plan related to new option of the institution. So it's coherent with what we did previously. It's the continuation of what we did, but the expression of the action plan is completely different. And I spent some time to explain that to the assessor and to write it in the narrative part of the action plan, of the new action plan, why we change, what is the continuity, and why we involve better this HRS4 action plan in our institutional plan.
But
So
let me make this clear.
Yeah.
Sorry, please continue. So let me make this clear. You changed the action plan by adding new actions, but you've completed the actions from the initial action plan.
I think that I reported also on some action that were not supported by the board. So when you have one board saying, so we have to be more international and so on, and the next one says, so it's not our priority, we will change the things. So I have not extended or in progress action, but I've decided to freeze some action till we can have a better supportive, let's say, context for doing that. And 4 years after, when you change the board, when you have new president, you can come back with this action by saying, so, okay, it's time to rediscuss about the priority of this action, or perhaps to express the action in another way and decide to drop it from the action plan, but for several years, for instance. So it's not a question of continuing the action, but changing, let's say, our perspective. But we have to take care, or you have to take care of the question of, isn't it, let's say, a shift to a more top-down approach in the sense it's not good. So you have always to refer to the researcher in order to know what are the needs, what are their priority, and is the action plan coherent with those gaps? Because it's called gaps, a gap.
Yeah, but as you mentioned at the beginning, we have to be aware that in best case scenario, the action is a reflection of the attitude of the key target groups or the researchers towards the compliance with the principles. So basically, the action plan is not the ownership of it's not the author work of the working group, but it's something that is forced bottom up. So it's pushed bottom up. So the arguments on revoking some of the actions or putting them on hold need to be really, really strong, in my view, as an assessor, because you did not change, you maybe changed the management, or maybe management changed the direction, but you cannot change researchers. You cannot change your employees. So basically, for me, this is kind of very difficult topic and needs to be argued very strongly, especially if you're revoking some action. But because when you mentioned you completely change the action plan, I mean, introducing a completely new set of actions in the internal review stage is completely valid. I mean, this is of course natural, and this will happen a lot. In fact, having the same set of actions which you had in the initial phase and just extending them to the second period is sloppy. This is lazy. I mean, this means that basically you don't recognize that something new happened in your organization to which you need to adapt.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we don't have any other questions that occurred in the meantime. I don't know if you have anything else you would like to comment on, or this would be it. Okay.
So should I say again?
Michele is raising his hand, so either Milan or Michele, please.
Okay, thank you. This is a wonderful opportunity to remind participants of things that are usually forgotten or overlooked. There was a wonderful sentence before from Milan's earlier in his presentation. It's better to delay your internal review rather than submitting a bad internal review. Please remember that you can ask for an extension in case you need additional time to complete your internal review. You can ask to the INDE tool for an extension of the deadline. So this is really crucial instead of submitting something that you're not satisfied with. just a reminder.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michele. Milan, you wanted to say something?
I just wanted to say again, don't panic. I mean, this is something. I mean, this is stage at which you really can help yourself. I mean, because you have 3 more years. That seems like a lot of time, you know, but it just goes like that. I mean, it can easily happen that you're getting close to the external review and that you are not happy with your progress. So at this point, the point of internal review, you can make those changes, you can review this progress, and you can use this opportunity of assessment by the expert to have additional explanations and help advices in how to proceed further. So good luck from my side, and thank you really for this wonderful opportunity to share with you.
Thank you, Milan, and thank you for your expertise, your time, and especially in the morning time. Even if you don't like it, it was perfect as always. So thank you so much, and special thanks to Isabel and to Michele, who participated very much with their expertise in this area. It was a wonderful presentation, wonderful Q&A session. I hope we all learned a lot in it, and we hope to have more of this in the future, in whichever format available. So please, just a note to all the participants, go to the HRS for our e-learning module. It's very useful. It's a great guidance to the whole procedure. You have all the webinars available there. This one will be also available in some time, so you can promote it, and there will be more content to come in the coming year, so stay tuned. And thank you once again to everyone and to participants, and hope to see you soon.
Bye-bye.